Hi, I'm Joseph Shryock, and I'm going to talk about my paper on the political ambition gap. So, for the actual essay, I focused on five sources. The first one is Ditmar, which focuses on three obstacles of gendered media, their opponents, and the voters, and it also focuses on how women are perceived in the media. I also went over Woolbricht, which focuses on the role models that women have in politics, and then Prusser and Blaze, kind of pulling from that to go along with the media bias. And then the Slaughter article on how the current workplace climate is outdated and there are some shifts that need to happen within the workplace in order to allow women the freedom to pursue political office or executive positions. And then also the Miller article on the encouragement of mentors to female candidates. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to focus on my two main sources. So the first one is Ditmar. So she talks about a three-pronged approach. They face the gendered media, they face opponents that focus on their gender, and then they face the voters that may or may not vote on gender lines. And I think the most important aspect of this work is the media bias. So an example from Prusser and Blaze is the Canadian 2004 Conservative leadership election, where the female candidate, 33% of her airtime, of her media exposure, focused on her style, her physical appearance, and not at all on her actual political stances and what she stands for and what she would offer as the head of the political party. Whereas her male counterpart only had 2% of his media exposure focus on those same aspects, and he had 98% of the time to talk about what he was actually going to do. And this is a huge deal. I mean, the 24-hour media cycle is probably one of the largest institutions in society. Everybody has a cell phone that's always connected to the news, so it's accessible mobily. I mean, when something happens in the world, it's on Twitter, it's on Facebook, it's on Reddit, it's on discussion boards, it's on NPR, it's on CNN, it's on formal and informal news sources where everybody takes it and expresses their own opinion through that medium. But the point is that anything happens in the world, it's immediately reported. And the problem here is that when a woman wants to run for political office and she sees this type of bias, it's very discouraging to see that your actual merits aren't even really that focused on within an election. And it focuses on this paparazzi style examination of who you are as a person instead of your actual accomplishments and what you bring to the table. This also ties into the role models issue discussed in Woolbricht, because there's a small pool of female candidates who are discouraged from things like media bias. There aren't as many women in politics as there should be to offer themselves as role models to other women that want to do the same thing, and that's a huge problem because it's not as cut and dry as if a woman's in political office, that means women are going to be elected and they're going to automatically look up to that person. But it certainly goes a long way to have female legislatures, female executives from both parties, so that people and hopefuls from both of those parties can look up to them and see what happens. But when women are discouraged to run for these offices in the first place by the media bias, that means it's just perpetuating that lack of role models. So I discussed two solutions in my paper. The first one being that it's a two-way street. So the media needs to change the way that they report on female candidates to get rid of this bias, because it's obvious and it's damaging. And then when those female candidates do get the confidence to run, they overcome this ambition gap. They need to take a stand. Carly Fiorina did this in her 2016 run-up for when she was trying to become the Republican nominee. She called out the news outlets that were focusing on her appearance and relied instead on her experience as an executive in a very, very wealthy Fortune 500 company to provide the actual reasons why she would be a good presidential candidate. So this needs to happen. Women need to defend themselves because they should be confident in their abilities and use this confidence to overcome the media bias. And another solution too actually comes from our week 7 reading on gender quotas. I think that's an excellent way to overcome, at least in the legislative branches of government, is that mandate there's a minimum amount of women that need to be in politics, because there's kind of a forced representation that happens. So the idea there is that when there is a minimum of women to be in politics, then there's at least a few role models to look up to, and that will encourage further women to put themselves into the race. And hopefully, by overcoming media bias and then having role models through that quota system, eventually we won't need it, and there'll be enough women involved that we have a wide field of candidates. So these are my two solutions to the political ambition gap.